Enakoto katoa, naumai harimai. Hola a todos, bienvenidos, welcome. Welcome back to the Thinking Life series. Tonight is the last but one in our webinar series from the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Te Kunengaki Purehuroa, Massey University, exploring how the things we teach and research can help us better understand a wide range of issues. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Sarah Riley, who will talk with us about how digital technology is shaping our lives. But first, a bit of housekeeping, please. We have enabled live captions, but you will need to individually turn them on. Just click the More icon here at the top, the three dots, choose Language and Speech, and then Show Live Captions. You can then turn them off and on at any time. While you're checking out the menu bar, you can also customize your view using the View icon. And if you think of a question during the talk, please click the Q&A icon anytime and type it in. At the end, we'll read out your questions for Sarah to answer live. About Sarah now, she's a professor in clinical health psychology in the School of Psychology at Massey University. Sarah has developed an award-winning hybrid critical psychology and media studies approach to the study of how discourse, affect, and materiality shape the possibilities for what people can say, think, feel, and do. She has received funding from several prestigious organizations, such as the British Academy, the Canadian Social Sciences and Research Council, and the Royal Society Te Aparangi. Her current projects include relationships between gender, technology, and bodies. Recent publications include Post-Feminism and Health from 2019, Post-Feminism and Body Image from 2022, and Digital Feeling 2023. Sarah chairs the International Society for Critical Health Psychology. Sarah's talk today is called How Digital Technology is Shaping Lives. What our research on period tracking apps tell us. So thank you, Sarah. We're delighted to have you with us tonight. And I'll hand over to you to make your PowerPoint live and take it away. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Selena. And kia ora koutou. Just loading. So, kia ora koutou, ko Sarah Riley toko inua. I'm a professor in critical health psychology and I'm in Te Whananui Atara, Wellington. I came here from the UK in 2019 to join the health psychology team at Massey, where I teach health psychology and qualitative research methods. I'm also the lead of a Marsden-funded project looking at people's experiences of using menstruation tracking apps, and it's my privilege today to tell you a little bit about that project. If you're listening to this talk, then you've probably got one on your phone, or perhaps you're just up curious. Either way, I hope to tell you a little about digital technology shaping our lives in ways perhaps that you haven't thought about before. So I thought I'd start by locating my work in the kind of psychology that I do. Broadly speaking, psychology asks questions about what do people think, feel, do, and why. And across psychology, we can answer those questions in a variety of ways. The approach I take is called critical health psychology, and it tends to focus on the social context, how that shapes what people can say, think, feel, and do. Specifically, we're interested in what possibilities are opened up and what are shut down by the wider world that people live in, whether that's their social, political, economic, or environmental context, or, as with menstruation tracking apps, their digital context. So menstrual tracking apps are a type of digital health technology, and they're based on the idea that technology can make visible bodily processes or functions that we couldn't see before. making us better informed about our body so that we can act on that information and optimize it. This is the promise of empowerment on offer by this tech, that you can know yourself better and hack yourself to live the life you want to lead. No wonder then that the apps are marketed as tools for empowerment, and people can report very positive feelings from using them. For example, one of my students interviewed young women who'd gone into early menopause related to their cancer treatment. They had reported using digital health apps to help them manage this difficult time for them. For example, they got a buzz out of meeting their daily fitness goal, and that motivated them to do their exercises the next day. But they also talked about how these apps could undermine them. So, regarding her sleep tracker, one participant said, I get notifications like, hey, you're not sleeping enough. And I'm like, stop making me feel bad about myself. I'm in menopause and that affects my sleep. So these apps can make people feel bad as well as good. And indeed, people report a whole range of feelings: pride, joy, pleasure, anxiety, also distress, guilt, and shame. And in our project, we wanted to know more about what kind of feelings and experiences were happening for people who used menstruation tracking apps. So we focused on menstruation tracking apps in part because they're a very common technology. Estimates are around 200 million regular users worldwide. And there are really high levels of smartphone ownership in New Zealand, estimates again at over 90%. And so it's likely that there's a lot of use of tracking apps in this country. If you haven't used one, menstruation tracking apps are also known as period or fertility tracking, and they primarily help users predict when their period will start and when their ovulation or fertility window is likely to be. They can also have other features such as predicting premenstrual syndrome, PMS, or energy levels, and they give all sorts of information broadly about reproductive health. But they are marketed as tools of empowerment beyond just giving information. So here's some of the ways that these apps address their user. Take full control of your health with the app, make empowered choices, know what's coming, manage how you feel, and enhance your life. So along with setting up expectations for optimizing, these apps tend to address a prototypical user, someone who is a young adult woman, consumerist, relatively white, straight, otherwise healthy, monogamous, focused on fertility. This leaves out a lot of people who menstruate who might be using this tech. And in this context, we wanted to know, how do app users with diverse bodies, identities, or who are at different stages of their life experience these tracking apps? So to address this question, we recruited 3 cohorts of diverse people who were using this tech, whose bodies or identities didn't fit that prototype. Specifically, teenagers, people who've recently had a baby, and people in perimenopause, that is the transition to menopause. And we invited them to join us in a cooperative inquiry study, which involves having regular meetings in small groups with similar people to explore shared experiences in depth. In total, we had 64 participants who met between 3 and 5 times in their group. This was a team effort, and I want to acknowledge Siobhan Healy-Cullen, who's been my partner on this project, and in turn, we've been supported by a group of academics and co-facilitators who are Maori and from other ethnic minorities or rainbow communities. So turning to our findings, our participants reported menstruation in general being hard work. Even the participants who described their menstruation as normal or unproblematic told us stories of significant difficulties, such as teenagers who had fainted from pain or people in perimenopause too afraid to use public transport in case they had excessive bleeding that spilt onto their seats. Others described lifelong concerns that created cycles of distress and anxiety, such as one of the parents who explained, I'd had irregular periods growing up, and I'd been told by doctors that I might struggle to conceive. And so when I got married, we had to have all of those conversations about, what if we struggle? What if we can't? It was quite a significant point of anxiety for me. So, in the context of menstruation being hard work, people turn to the tracking apps to help them manage, to get to that point of being, as the marketers say, know what's coming and enhance your life. Or, as one of the teenagers explained more practically, know when to pack sanitary products and if your holiday is going to be ruined. So, in the context of menstruation being hard work, the apps were experienced as essential for learning, functioning, and communicating. In terms of learning, our participants wanted to know what's happening? Is this normal? What can I do to help manage it? These shared questions varied in their form across the life stage. Teenagers needed information about what periods were and what to expect and what products were available. People in perimenopause needed to understand new patterns that were emerging during this transition. And parents described using these apps to learn how best to have a baby. As one participant said, it was certainly super helpful in the beginning when you're just sort of learning more about your body and how getting pregnant works and all that sort of thing. But a lot of this learning was happening in the context of not having the education or knowledge that they needed or help to negotiate advice online. Another issue was that people often had more complex embodied experiences than the kind of standard ones taught in school. For example, if their periods were irregular or if they had health conditions like diabetes, which were affected by their periods. And they hoped that the apps would help with these specific needs. Along with learning, participants also described how apps help them function in terms of planning and managing their life. This included holidays, work, trying to conceive, PMS symptom management. As one of our perimenopausal participants explained, in terms of a 12-hour workday and a long commute, app period predictions were essential for planning around bringing supplies to work or preferably organising working from home days. This functioning support was valued by our participants, but it was set in the context of wider stigma and shame around menstruating bodies, such as not wanting to be seen going to the bathroom a lot at work. Menstruation tracking apps were also experienced as essential for communicating with healthcare providers. They were useful for answering the kinds of technical questions doctors want for you, and the tracking apps could act like a kind of external memory, giving precise information when needed. But concerningly, participants talked a lot about using these apps to mediate conversations because they would not be listened to or believed otherwise. They cited experiences of fat phobia, sexism, dismissal, and pale male stale doctors, one of whom turned to our participant's husband to ask whether she was really experiencing the kind of pain she had just described. This sent the message that she was not to be believed without a man's corroboration. In this context of medical gaslighting, participants felt that the tracking app data provided a weapon in the battle to be heard and believed. We also found that while menstruation tracking apps were tools for learning, functioning, and communicating, they were themselves deeply limited. There was significant labor in data entry, and participants were worried if it's worth it. Would it give them the info or the ability to act that they were looking for? And the answer was often very unclear. They also reported feeling trapped or controlled when they couldn't download their data and move from one app to another that might serve them better. It turns out their data was never theirs. And when things didn't materialize as they had hoped or expected, there was little explanation for these so-called failures. So they couldn't act to help themselves. And this occurred when people didn't conceive or when they continued to experience ongoing embodied challenges despite tracking. More importantly, the tech often failed to meet broader needs. For example, advice for optimizing your sex life was often easy to access on the apps and not always what was wanted. But advice for health needs that were wanted, such as those relating to perimenopause or managing chronic health conditions like diabetes, were often behind a paywall and harder to access. Indeed, the whole vibe often felt alienating. As one of the parents said, it's designed for upper middle class white women in America who have very uniform periods and who have very positive experiences in healthcare. I'm using the word alienating, but that's because that's the actual experience, Americanized white woman wellness vibes. So drawing this talk to its conclusion, Our study highlighted how menstruators described their periods as hard work when invited to think and talk about it. They also described a lack of viable information, of medical gaslighting, and wider stigma regarding their bodies. In this context, menstruators proactively tried to help themselves, seeking the empowerment that menstruation tracking apps promised. But this commercialized tech undermined them in various ways, layering on further distress. So, as we've been working on this project, it's become increasingly clear to us that we need publicly funded tech that is free to use and designed to be inclusive and empowering for a range of bodies and identities. And we also need changes to our wider social context so that the girls, women, and non binary people who menstruate can be valued, live free lives free of stigma, and be supported to manage this natural and sometimes challenging bodily function. As one of our Maori participants put it, we need to recognise menstruating bodies as tonga. So, thank you for listening to this talk. If you want to know more about studying health psychology, you can do that as an optional course if you major in psychology at undergraduate level, or if you enroll on a postgraduate program in psychology, you can take some of our courses there. Or you can dive straight in and do the full MSc Psychology endorsement in health and take all of our courses. There's details on the Massey University website, but we also have a dedicated program website. You just have to remember www.masseyhealthpsychology.co.nz. So thanks for listening, and I will open up for questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
My pleasure. No difficult question.
Okay, let me see. Okay, I'll start with a question by Elspeth.
Thanks, Elspeth.
Why do we still in this day and age have shame around menstruating bodies, and what can we do about it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was found that fascinating, thinking like this is the country that had suffrage, and yet you still have to bring your husband to speak to the doctor, which says something about the issues around women's health not being prioritized or valued. There's a kind of standard male body, and if you don't fit those standards, like any norms, then you are somehow problematic. So I think there's a history of shame around menstruation, at least in Western cultures, which we have brought with us. And there's kind of contemporary expectations for people to live these kind of like optimized normal lives, and hidden underneath that is a male body that doesn't do much change. So I think there's a few things that are keeping the stigma going, and then and kind of just the historical ideas around it in terms of all the stereotypes, which I've just decided I won't repeat. So what I think we can do about it is talk about it, which is why I offered to give this talk, and you were kind enough to say yes, it's okay to talk about menstruation in these sessions. So I appreciate that, the opportunity to have it as a normal thing to talk about. Our participants often especially the perimenopausal people who were experiencing shame intersecting menstruation and aging, and so often had not been talking about this, found it quite freeing in the groups that we ran, and then experimented with other conversations. So at work, in a long car journey with friends, that kind of thing. And they found it really empowering to start those conversations. So I guess one of the easy solutions is that we just talk about it more. And then harder solutions are thinking about larger social change. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll go back to some of that later on, but now another question, one by Leonel. Leonel Alvarado, who owns, this is a very important one too, who owns and controls the data? And
Yeah.
could it be used for nefarious purposes? if it's not controlled by the users?
Yes, is the short answer for that. So the people who own the app own the data, and there'll be a terms and conditions when you sign up to use it, which will tell you roughly what's happening with the data, although that's not always clear. And there's different kinds of data. So there's the data that you're actively inputting, when your period starts, for example, and there's data that they're collecting. For example, if you get the one that always hits me is, with any of these apps, if it says like, half price if you invite a friend, I thought they were trying to increase their network, but they're actually also mapping who knows who.
Okay.
So there's those kinds of information, there's inferences that they can take from the data that you've added. So there's so they can like infer that you're pregnant without you having to put that information in, and that's data. So there's a whole range of data, some of which you may have included in the terms and conditions, some may not be because it's not considered your data of you putting it in, all of which may be sellable or shareable in some way or another. So that makes people quite vulnerable. Um, and in the case of kind of the reproductive health control, for example, that's happening in countries like the States, that makes people really vulnerable. But it's beyond the States as well. So in the UK, for example, there's limits to the time limit when you can have a termination. And there have been examples of women coming to hospitals saying they've had a late miscarriage and the police being called in case it's an illegal abortion. And so someone's gone for healthcare and now they're being arrested, and the app is being used as data. I had a look to see whether it's possible to do that in New Zealand, and it's possible, but as far as I can tell, has not been done.
Thank you, Sarah. The next question by Katia. What features do you think are the most important to have in an MTA to have a good app for all or most people?
Gosh, great question, difficult one. So in the larger group that this project is part of, we've been thinking like, do we need an app for everybody, or should apps start to specialize now and try and aim specifically for specific groups that it can meet that need better? And we have an example here, Ihoa, which is a Maori app that's based on the lunar calendar. So that's
Ah,
sort of
yes.
speaking to a specific group and group's needs. So that's one option is, and I think the marketing people will say more about this, is you start certain point in a development of a type of object, you start to split it up into more niches. So that's a possible and might meet needs better. And then I think if we're going to do general ones, like say if we could have one for this country, then we can draw on critical disability studies as principle. One of their principles is that you center difference. And what they mean by that is you start assuming that everybody is different and that difference is valuable and important. Most of the time, we start with the norm. What's the most normal? And then we're inclusive by widening that norm slightly. But there's still loads of people outside that norm that don't fit, and then, have that uncomfortable, alienating experience with their environment, whether it's digital or not. So if we can start from those principles of difference is valued and difference is and everyone is different, then we can hopefully start to develop inclusive tech that can meet a wider range of needs.
Thank you, Sarah. And my question was precisely was along those lines in
Mm,
terms of the app because I haven't used them. So uh, I was curious about what's normality or how is normality because you have a lot of data. You are inputting data and you're receiving data, but crude data doesn't tell you if you're fine or if you're not fine. So in the
yes.
apps, how is that pictured? You are fine or you are not so fine?
What the apps do is they predict when your next period will be, and they do that um, broadly with a calendar method. And then, so it's 28 days, half that, roughly 12 to 16 is probably where day is going to be when your period is. And those apps that just do that are quite inaccurate. I should add to anyone listening, do not use this as contraception, right? Unless you don't mind getting pregnant. So those are quite inaccurate. And then there's like the next layer up that's got more resources that are using machine learning and AI, and they are recognizing that the bodies, that's we're going to start off with that, and then we'll see what people are inputting and compare it with these huge data sets, like millions and millions of data points, to start being able to kind of cluster people, I guess, and sort of say like it's likely that with the pattern you've got that your period will be earlier or later. And then what people sometimes see is the start date prediction change. So after a while, they'll be like, oh, okay, so it was always predicting me at this time, but now it's moved it. And so so that's one way in which it kind of creates a norm. And people find that quite unsettling because it doesn't really tell you it's updated, it just sort of happens. And you also can't go back and see how accurate it was before. And then the other way that norms are established is that sometimes the apps will categorize you as regular and irregular. And that has been a big thing because people think when they are regular that that's a good thing, that's normal and healthy. But actually, most people's cycles are slightly irregular at the very least. But why the app does the categories is you are easy to predict if you're regular. So you're literally put into the good basket, but it's good from the app perspective. But what people see is themselves being put in the bad basket or changing categories into the bad basket and getting quite upset by that because they see themselves as not being normal anymore. But really, it's nothing to do with norms. It's to do with the tech is doing and how easy it is to do predictions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We need to finish here. Katya had a question if she can participate in the study still. Is the study
Uh,
still ongoing? And then we need to
all right,
finish.
we
Yeah.
are probably finished with data
Mhm.
collecting, but she can email me. If she's in the 16 to 18 group, we're still recruiting, otherwise not. But if she wants to email me, then I can always include her when we do the kind of the findings that we share with our participants so
Mhm.
that she can hear firsthand what's going on. So I'm s.riley@massey.ac.uk, but I'm the only Sarah in the psychology department. So if you can find psychology or Massey, then you can find me.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have now for Q&A, but thanks everyone for your thoughtful questions. Thank you, Sarah, for discussing this fascinating topic.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank,
Thank you.
mhm. Thank you, Tim Jurgens, our technician who helped us a lot. Um, Most of all, though, thank you for our audience. We look forward to your company. Tomorrow is our last talk of the series, The Power of Feeling, How Emotions Shape Our Minds. It's one of my research topics, so I'm excited. Same link, same time, so hopefully see you here. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, and adios.
Kakite.